we have a fun special for you all. You might have seen him on Morning Joe. You might have seen him on NBC Nightly News, but you probably have never seen him talk about sports. We have NBC's famous correspondent, Steve Kornacki, with the whiteboard to walk us through some of the big stats to look for in women's sports. And just a plug to Steve, Steve will be a correspondent for NBC Sports at the Olympics as well. So give it up for Steve Kornacki.
All right. How's everybody doing? This is, I'm kind of overwhelmed by the view here. First time in France, first time in Europe, first time here, so pretty exciting. But yeah, I mean, I usually have a big electronic board that lights up. It's got all sorts of numbers coming in. I couldn't get it into the overhead cabin in the flight, so this is what we got. Whiteboard, and I figure we'll use blue and red ink because we're in France, so get the colors of the French flag. But so I would just go through some of the, talk about women's sports having a moment, the momentum, the conversation, just hearing it in the last session right there. Maybe just put some numbers on it, because I think when you look at the numbers and the trends, the recent ones, and maybe some longer term, it's pretty striking to me. So I thought a good place to start might be, women's basketball obviously getting the most attention right now. And a good place to start might be college basketball and the Final Four. So I think a couple ways to, in the national championship games, so a couple ways to look at this. One, we'll go back 15 years. So this is 2009, okay? And you're going to get the men and the women, if you can read my writing. And we're going to look at the national championship game for each. In 2009, on the men's side, that was North Carolina, Michigan State. Those are brand name schools. North Carolina had won a title a couple years before. Michigan State had won one too in 2000. And the audience was 17.7 million, the television audience for the men's final that year. Now, on the women's side, UConn was playing, and UConn at that point was the undisputed, powerhouse in women's college basketball. They were playing Louisville in the national championship game, and the audience for that television audience was 2.7 million. So basically 6 times the audience. Men's championship game, women's championship game. This is 15 years ago. And for a number of years there, this was pretty much stable, this kind of gap between the men and the women. But let's fast forward then 13 years to 2022, because some interesting things start to happen then. Now, on the men's side in 2022, you again got a compelling blue blood matchup in the championship game. That was Kansas and North Carolina. 18.1 million people on television watched that matchup. On the women's side, UConn, yep, still at it. UConn playing South Carolina. South Carolina now emerging at that point to challenge UConn for supremacy in the women's game. And their national championship game that year got 4.9 million viewers. So the men's pretty stable over that period. The women's, still a big gap there with the men, but the women's numbers have almost doubled in those 13 years from 2009 to 22. Now continue it to last year, to 2023. On the men's side, UConn, men's team also does pretty well, was in it against San Diego State. What was the audience for that? Well, San Diego State, Mountain West Conference, didn't have a built-in national following, so the men took a little bit of a hit, pretty big hit actually. 14.7 million was the television audience for the men's championship game. Meanwhile, the women, that was Iowa, LSU, obviously, talk about that Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese rivalry. How about this? So from 2.7 to 4.9, now 9.9 million. Highest number ever for a women's championship game, 2023. Lowest number for the men, and the smallest gap between men and women for a national title game. Now we'll go 1 year further, just a couple months ago, 2024. And on the men's side, UConn's back. Now they got a Big Ten opponent, Purdue. Ratings go up by about 100,000, 14.8 million. It wasn't much of a game, if you remember. UConn, Purdue, 14.8 million. Meanwhile, on the women's side, Iowa is back, and now it's Iowa against South Carolina. South Carolina having supplanted UConn as the kind of premier program, undefeated going into that game. And what was the women's audience? We've seen 2.7, we've seen 4.9, we've seen 9.9, and now we see 18.9 million. So you're almost 9 times the audience you were 15 years ago. Women's sports now higher in the men's and approaching 20 million for the women's championship game. So just talking about this moment women's sports is having, I thought that sort of history was the most striking to me. Just one other extension of it, I think, would just be the WNBA, because I think the issue here, or the possibility here for women's sports is, it's an old reference, but maybe you remember Bird Magic. College basketball, 1979 national title game, Michigan State and Indiana State. It was massive. It's the highest rating ever for a men's championship game. Captivating story. Whole country was into it. And what happened after that? Two things. Bird and Magic went to the NBA, and the NBA ratings soared in the 1980s. And the college game, having gotten that much interest for that game, the men's college game took off as well in the NCAA tournament in the 1980s. So is there an effect? We're seeing the college level. Is there a WNBA effect as well? So far this season, Caitlin Clark now in the league, the average audience television for a women's WNBA game, 1.3 million. Last year, that number was 460,000, so it's a threefold increase. Go back 5 years before that, 2018, the number was sitting at 240,000. So it almost doubled from 18 to 23, and now it's tripled. So I think you see these two trends here. They're very pronounced. They're very strong. And I guess the big question is, we say that, NBA, college basketball exploded about 45 years ago. Is this that same moment for women's sports? That's my presentation. All right.
All right, you're sticking around with us.
Are you in the
You tell me where to go here. I'll take it.
I'll grab this back.
You want that? Okay.
All right, everyone. Steve, that was awesome. And to do all this by memory is pretty incredible. So thank you, Steve, for doing that. So Steve is joined by his colleague, Alison Levin, who is the president of advertising at NBC Universal. Thank you, Alison, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
It's so hard to come to this, really. What a
it's
horrible
brutal,
place.
Right? Okay, so we have to ask you about the Olympics. NBC announced that you sold $1.2 billion in advertising. That was a few months ago now, so where does it stand now?
Yeah, first let me take a step back and just listening to the last panel talking about supporting women in sports being good for business. We see that on our end too. And I thought, thinking specifically about the Olympics, one of the studies we saw from last Olympics was that female athletes actually within commercials versus male athletes, consumers remembered it at a 14% higher brand recognition for that advertising versus a male athlete. So to the point that this is good for business, it just straight up is. So we were excited to hear that, and we doubled down on that. We cannot wait for the Olympics. Of course, we'll be back in France really, really soon. The interest has been tremendous, both from the consumer side, but also the advertiser side. Just thinking about the moments that drive so much viewership so quickly and bring us together as a country, particularly in times like this. Like, from an advertising perspective, what's more powerful than that? So we continue to see interest from the large advertisers into our ecosystem. All the way, we announced that we have programmatic access for the first time ever for Olympics. So we're really transforming the way advertisers can participate in the space. And it's going to be the largest Olympics ever, both from a viewership side, but also on a brand support side.
So on that brand support side, is it still safe to say we're at 1.2 billion? Is it higher than that? What are we looking at?
I would not be sitting up here if I didn't sell more than that moment that we announced a little while ago. But we're not disclosing the specific number right now, but the momentum continues to grow. And as we continue to move, into the Olympics, again, like having advertisers that are supporting big moments. Like, for instance, in August, there's going to be one day where you have Simone Biles, Sha'Carri, and Katie all going for the gold on the same day, right? So from an advertising perspective, we're here helping advertisers understand how to surround those big moments. And then brands that have never had access before to the Olympics are going to have it in an automated, programmatic way and understand performance in real time. So across the board, we're really excited to see all the brands that come into the ecosystem.
And just a quick follow-up to that, I was going to ask, what percentage of brands, or how many brands roughly, are like the big ones that are sponsors of the IOC versus smaller brands that are coming in for the first time because it's more accessible?
Yeah, the brands that are the sponsors have the big moments where you have, real breakthrough, right? So they're surrounding the opening games and other places like that. But again, like we've seen, for instance, just within live sports in the last year, an 87% increase in the number of brands that actually have bought live sports from NBC Universal. So if you just take that to the largest sporting event that we are going to have of the year, we expect the same trajectory to be there. And it's just, again, a great opportunity to surround a moment of such togetherness, happiness, and it's just good for business to find people in that moment of suspense when you can.
Steve, you walked us through some of the numbers. What are the big takeaways and trends that you're tracking in terms of women's sports?
Yeah, I think it's just that the WNBA is the one I'm most interested in as the year kind of plays out and get to the playoffs and the finals. Because I think what's interesting to me is I want to find some numbers to match up with the conversation. Because I think we could show all the numbers right there, but it just the conversation around WNBA, around Caitlin Clark, I mean, whatever, without getting into the nitty gritty of any of it, just the fact, I think, that this conversation is now so prominent in our culture. It's no longer, discussions about the WNBA in the past, existed in a pretty small niche corner. Now the whole culture is talking about it. So those regular season ratings are one thing. You see with the NBA, it always really picks up in the playoffs. So curious to see as the year progresses what happens with those.
Absolutely. And Alison, to the point about the WNBA, it's been reported that NBC is interested in that third NBA package, which would include the WNBA with it. If NBC were to get those rights, what is the advertising opportunity for you?
And for us, and this our whole theme of Cannes actually is live. And moments of live are really important for us for our business. And Peacock, 300 out of 365 days of the year are live because we are there to support our advertisers and make their advertising more efficient and effective. And live sports does just that. So for us, it's going to continue to be a focus to promote live, to have brands be a part of live. And as that grows and changes over time, that will continue to be the case.
And how does streaming play into that? Because I think I saw that this is the first time that NBC is putting every single event on Peacock.
Every event. I mean, the most amazing thing actually about Peacock is when you look at the viewership of it, for a long time, and as you know, Sarah, I've been in streaming for a really long time. I think the common thesis was that streaming is going to cannibalize linear as far as viewership on live. And we just have not seen that. Like time and time again, viewership across both has continued to grow over the last couple of years. And streaming is just bringing in a whole new audience into the ecosystem that's younger, obviously cord cutters, more diverse. And so again, it's just an opportunity for advertisers to amplify what they're already investing in the linear side.
And just a quick follow-up to those advertisers. What are the categories that you think are coming in really hot for this year's Olympics that maybe sat out last year, 2021 and 2022?
I will say honestly, like there's not, and I've got to ask this question a lot, there's not one category or another that is leaning in or not. I think across the board, this isn't just about sports, it's moments of togetherness and driving fast reach, right? What drives the advertising performance for any client is finding a lot of people quickly and being able to understand performance of them, right? And nothing does that better than these Olympic moments. So really, and I know this is such a non-answer, but across the board, there's a lot of different categories that have leaned in the same way. I will say access for advertisers that historically maybe haven't even been linear advertisers, might not have had video creative they thought they can run in a moment like the Olympics, or maybe had smaller budgets, now have access in a way they never have had before. So I think that's an opportunity for brands to lean in, to test it, to see their performance, and then continue to grow.
All right, so let's wrap up with one fun thing. We'll start with you, Steve. What's the one women's sporting event that you're looking forward to the most?
Well, I mean, we're in the Olympic season, so let's see about. I didn't get to it in here, but let's see about gymnastics this summer, because I was one thing I found comparing all these numbers was women's gymnastics at the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo. The final got a higher rating than the World Series, the NBA Finals, and by far the Stanley Cup Finals. So it really kind of it carries the momentum of the Olympics as women's sports and gymnastics in particular.
Yeah, I have to say ditto. I have two young girls, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and we spend a lot of time watching Simone Biles clips. So I have a feeling that's going to be in my household, a lot of gymnastics moments, which we're really excited for.
Some incredible takeaways. I think, Steve, the fact that you can get all these numbers off of your head, I cannot wait to see what your Olympics correspondent role looks like. And also, one of the things I wanted to note about the NCAA Women's Championship numbers, this is a gradual progression. I think a lot of people saw this year as Caitlin Clark's breakout year. But if you take a look, we had 9.9 million, then to the 18.9 million. So the momentum has been building. Alison said there's been a 14% higher brand recognition when brands put women athletes in their advertising. I think that's such a testament to why we are all here today. It's all about live. That is why NBC is here. You are focused on that at Cannes Lion and with your sports programming. You said, Steve, that you are very much looking forward to the WNBA and its trajectory for the rest of the year, as are we. And then finally, women's gymnastics. It seems to be where you both are taking a really, really strong interest. I am curious now to see what those ratings are like. I did not realize that the last time with with women's gymnastics, it rated higher than the men's NCAA final and the World Cup. That is some incredible stuff. Alison Levin, Steve Kornacki from NBCU, thank you so much for joining us today. All right, everyone. Don't go anywhere. We got 2 more media conversations. All right, we got 2 all-stars in the media game. I am very lucky. This is a return to Axios' stage for TelevisaUnivision's U.S. Advertising and Marketing President, Donna Speciale. Donna, come join me on stage. It's good to see you, Donna.
Good to see you too.
All right, so for those of you who are not watching TelevisaUnivision, there's a lot for you to watch. That's one of the things that we wanted to talk about today. Donna is a longtime advertising veteran coming from Turner, now at Televisa. And so you know a lot about sports advertising. TelevisaUnivision has exclusive rights to Liga MX Femenil, which is sort of the women's soccer division of Mexico's big Premier League. Walk us through why you placed that bet, why you wanted those rights, and what the marketing opportunity is around it.
So for those of you who don't know, we are the home of soccer for Hispanics. And Liga MX is one of the fastest growing leagues in the U.S. So we've always had Liga from a viewing perspective, but last year we then obtained the IP rights. So we now sell Liga with the rights as well, so which is huge.
Yeah, walk us through what it means to have the rights versus not have the rights.
Well, you know, if you usually have to get rights to leagues, you have to deal with the leagues itself. Now, advertisers and clients can get everything through us. Logos, stadium signage, everything that they want to do, utilizing it in their creative and stuff like that. So we've been out in the market for the past year and a half selling. We have some major clients have leaned in, State Farm, Hyundai, Petria, to name a few that have come on board. And to your point, Liga MX Femenil is part of that package as well. And now, given the excitement and all the conversation, and thank you and Laura Correnti for actually having conversations about women's sports, because it definitely is a conversation that now a lot of clients are leaning in for us.
So when clients come to you and they say, I want to put my message around Liga MX Femenil, but I don't necessarily have the tools to do Spanish language messaging, or I'm not quite sure how to be culturally relevant to this audience, like what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, well, first, obviously, it's all about creative and messaging, and I loved what Alison said about women being in advertising and having it really resonate, because we have a content studio called Axios Studios, and brand storytelling is crucial. And for women specifically, I think the storytelling is critical. I think this gentleman here, Rich, he actually talked about the storytelling being so critical to have it resonate. And so we take it to the next level with Hispanics, because we're so tied to the community that the stories of these women, of how they're rising and how they're getting into the space from their communities, is really what the clients are trying to align to. Because that authenticity of that culture of the story is what will resonate and really take their sponsorship to a whole new level.
You mentioned that Liga MX is one of the fastest growing sports, not just in Mexico, but people in the U.S. are watching it. Is that holding true for Femenil?
Yes.
And why do you think that is?
Listen, just the fact that, we're talking about soccer, okay, which in the U.S., we didn't really used to talk about soccer that much. So this is been a huge transformation just in sports. I mean, NBA, NFL, you talk about Super Bowl, right? World Cup. I mean, there's a lot. We got Copa coming on June 20th. It's huge, first time in the U.S. So soccer itself has taken such a huge transformation in the U.S. Mexico, it's obviously been with Latino culture. That's soccer, football. That's what we live on. U.S., it was a little slow. So now I think what's happening is they're seeing the excitement and the fandom is now coming to the U.S. and it's in men, but it's also now transcending with women, and we see it like taking off both places.
You mentioned a few brands, State Farm, obviously being your huge official partner, but also Hyundai. What are the brands that are sitting out when it comes to promoting and supporting women's sports? Is it a category-specific thing, and why is that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, in general, not just sports-related, there are definitely still many advertisers that do not lean into the Hispanic audience, Hispanic marketing. So, I think as a sales organization, our job is actually very different than most sales organizations because we start educating clients on Hispanic marketing and why it's important, and Hispanics being 20% of the population and 62 million people. So we're educating every day about Hispanics and Latino audience. Then once we get through there, it's okay, culture, authenticity, the passion points, and music and sports are those moments that are culturally relevant and that we have the highest of all across the board in the US of viewership.
But in terms of the advertisers that want to support it versus ones that don't, like what are the types of advertisers that you wish would pay more attention because the audience is the right audience for them?
Listen, I'm glad that auto came in. They're a big player. Insurance now has become huge. At one point, insurance wasn't there, so thank you for State Farm. But the two categories is pharma and financial. For years has been underrepresented with Hispanic marketing. In general, sports, obviously, yes, but in general, non-existent.
And so when we talk about sort of some categories being behind versus others that are leaning in, you were saying a big part of your role is educating them. What would you tell them is the value of putting their advertising around Liga MX Femenil and women's sports? Is it the quality of the audience, the demographics, or places they can't get anywhere else? What's the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, listen, with Hispanics being 20% of the population, by not leaning in authentically in language and culture, you're missing a complete audience. I mean, all clients care about is growing their business. It's a huge growth opportunity. By not talking to 20% of the population, you're missing out. So being authentic and having that connection, clients that do lean in and have come in for the first time have seen a huge ROI and their KPIs have taken off because it's all new reach. I mean, we look at it and look at where they're spending their money, and I don't sit here and look at their schedules, but they're leaning into a lot of English language, and there's a lot of repetition and a lot of same old. And when they come in and finally crack the code, we help them with their creative. Now, I do not profess and I do not want to be a creative agency, but we've had to go into that space because sometimes they do not have creative. And we look at their English language creative, we do translations, we show them how they can tweak it a little bit. We even do it for them at certain points. And once it happens, once they're in for life.
I love that. And so then the last thing I wanted to get to, a lot of these rights, especially for Liga MX Femenil, are on ViX, your streaming platform.
Both.
I have once asked your colleague, Nacho Meyer, why are there no competitors to ViX? And so I'm putting that question to you. Why don't we have, other than ViX, like major Spanish language streaming services that cater to this growing fan base?
Yeah, it was a huge opportunity. We saw it. 2 years ago when we launched it, there was no Spanish-speaking streaming service anywhere in the country. We are now global, and we're really excited about it. I will say that you do see other streaming services leaning in to Hispanic programming. I think they're realizing the growth opportunity, but they're not doing it like we do. We have production facilities in Miami and in Mexico, and all of our original content, the majority of our original content come from us. We know we have all the insights and we know how to do it right, so a lot of that programming resonates really well with our audience. I mean, you can do it, but if you don't do it right, it doesn't resonate.
I love that. I also love once you are in for life. Shows the value of your audience and your product. Liga MX, the fastest growing league in the USA, including Liga MX Femenil, which is incredible. You have the rights so that you can sell through the logos and everything directly to the clients, which is absolutely incredible. You do not want to be a creative agency, but you do have Aussie Studios to help marketers if they want to do things like translations, understanding the cultural relevancy, et cetera. 20% of the U.S. population is Hispanic. That's an incredible
And growing.
number. And growing, 62 million people. As you said, Donna, if you are not there, you are missing out. Donna Speciale from TelevisaUnivision, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, guys.
All right. Quick pick. Thank you, everyone. A round of applause for Donna Speciale. All right, and we have one last media conversation, and then Laura will close out the show. I am very excited to welcome Jess Sibley, the CEO of TIME Inc., to the stage. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
So folks might be wondering, why Time? What does Time have to do with sports? And the answer is, and women's sports, actually a good amount. Time has been investing a lot in putting women athletes on their cover, creating new products for things like the World Cup. So I wanted to talk to Jess today about why you're making the investment and what the return on investment is for you. So thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's actually not new for Time.
Give us some historical examples.
So we had a milestone year last year. We celebrated our 100th, our centennial.
Congratulations.
Amazing. And ironically, I'm the CEO of Time, and Time was started by men for busy men that didn't have a lot of time 100 years ago. Think about that. We all feel like we don't have time now. But in preparing for this conversation, I actually went back in our 100 years of archives. And in 1924, so in our second year, we had Edith Cummings on our cover. And she was a professional golfer. So not a lot of women to this day in golf. And we had her on our cover. Sarah, you did an incredible piece in 2019 about Time, that we had more women on our covers that year than men. The numbers are still not great. We need to do more. But we've always invested in telling the stories. We tell them differently. We cover athletes as icons. We talked a lot today about as brands. I would say we cover them as icons, as activists, and individuals that are building a better future and leading and driving change. And when we work with incredible women in sports, I think they see Time as an opportunity to tell their story, but also to not just be considered an athlete, to make history. You know, we have a saying, when it's in time, it's in history, and when it's in history, it's in time. So I think this is something that we've been doing for over 100 years.
And most recently, you had Coco Gauff on your cover in April. How do you make those decisions? I know you're not on the editorial side, but how do they make those decisions that we want to highlight a woman athlete, put her on the cover, and go big on that? And when they do make those decisions, like, how do you pick up the baton and then go and sell it?
Yeah, we have Women of the Year. So we're known for Person of the Year, Time 100. And we launched Women of the Year several years ago. We had Megan Rapinoe 2 years ago on our cover. She was on our stage. And we had Coco Gauff as one of our incredible Women of the Year leaders. She was playing at Indian Wells in California. She left the tournament to attend our event honoring and celebrating her and several other amazing women. She wasn't even 19 yet. She was just having a birthday a week later. And then she returned back to the tournament. So we kind of got lucky there. I'll tell you something. I know we're on the record, but we received a call from Vogue, someone very famous, I Condé Nast, who said, Coco's on our cover.
Who that could be.
Coco's on our cover. And we'd prefer not to have her on your cover at the same time. And we ran the cover several months later, and I think we got really lucky, and sports and women in sports just like had a huge moment and blew up since then. And I checked my phone the morning the launch cover went live digitally, and I just saw one word, and it said fire.
And it was an email from Chris Davis, who's the CMO of New Balance, and she's a New Balance athlete, and you have to see the cover. She looks stunning in her tennis gear.
So when you think about that as an opportunity, putting women in sport on the cover, there's also an opportunity in putting them on your list, right? Because Time is the curator of the Time 100, the Time New Ideas Best of whatever it is list. Is that a conscious effort that you're doing to put more female athletes on the list, or is it something that's just happening organically?
It's both. It's definitely something that I've been focused on and I've been looking at, not just women, but inclusion, diversity, age-wise, geographic-wise, gender. We launched the first ever Time 100 AI list last year. So the 100 most influential, important people today in AI. And I was really proud that we had over 50% diverse and also 40% women. And I had sort of thought of AI a year ago and 2 years ago as like a technology, and to have such incredible representation from women. We actually had an 18-year-old woman on our list who's an activist in ethics and AI. Same with climate. We launched that last year. We had over 50% of women that are driving and leading change in climate today. We recognize Jane Fonda and many others that are doing incredible things. And yeah, marketers really want to opt in, and they want to be part of these communities. They want to be part of this content. They want to be part of these stories. So we have branded content opportunities. We've got obviously live event opportunities. And everyone on the lists really want to be part of Time and part of the community themselves. And they want to be with us, and they want to be with these brands as well. So it's worked out really successfully for us. And when we look at the Time 100 or Time 100 Next, we always have incredible athletes, and a lot of them now are women.
And in terms of the women that show up on these lists, what do you do for their careers? Like, what does that mean to be on a Time 100 list if you're a young, up-and-coming female athlete?
It changes their lives. So they've told me in such a different way. And it's not just women. I loved hearing Donna speak. We had a huge moment where we put Bad Bunny on our cover, and he gave 2 interviews. That's it. One to Billboard, which is obviously industry, and one to Time. And he knew we weren't covering him as an entertainer, a performer, a singer. He's extremely talented, but this was a movement. This was a milestone. This was a moment to make history. And we did. We had the first all Spanish language cover in our 100-year history, all Hispanic team, and we were really proud of that, and he was as well.
Okay, and so then we want to also end with you on one fun thing. You guys did, and you continue to do, like, a lot of pop-up products. So when something is really hot, you'll just create a new newsletter, you'll create a new thing. You guys did a pop-up newsletter for, I think it was a Women's World Cup coverage. Walk us through how that went. What was the success story behind that?
Yeah, we were really excited. One part of our business that people don't know as much about is Time Studios. So we do documentaries and docuseries. We've had that conversation here today, and we're very much a part of that. It's fairly new for us, a couple years in now, and we won the exclusive rights at the World Cup to cover the U.S. team. So we had an all-female team, director, editors, producers, sound, and we were with the team. We sold the documentary to Netflix, and you can watch it if you haven't seen it. It's called Under Pressure. Supposed to be 5 episodes, but they lost, so we only did 4. But these are incredible ways that we sort of take our content, we take the community, we take our lists, and we bring it into a new format. And in this case, it's just an exceptional piece of art and work covering these athletes and what they go through, and when you don't always win. And so, yeah, it would have been amazing, but it's just great work, and we're going to continue to do all of that at Time. And then we do a newsletter and branded content, and we have Megan at our event and on our list, and women and on our cover, and all of those things.
It's a full circle flywheel. I love that you shared that example about Edith Cummings being on the Time Inc. cover in 1924.
Golf.
That is incredible, a woman golfer. You cover athletes as icons, as activists, as people who are building a better future, which is perhaps a different lens than other, iconic media players. Time Inc. obviously had, the only publication this year to have interviews with Biden, Trump, and Taylor Swift. So clearly you are equipped to be doing the kind of work on icons. You talked a little bit about the call that you got from Vogue asking you, please, please, please don't run that cover. We have the same person. It speaks to how hot not just Coco Gauff is, but women athletes as being subjects of these covers. It's absolutely incredible. And then I love this. When I asked, what does it mean for a woman athlete to be on a Time cover, you said, it changes their lives. Jess Sibley, CEO of Time, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. Thank you.